So today I'm going to be wiring up the lighting. For the lighting, I have this kit that came with a headlight, a tail light, and a controller that you can turn on and off the headlight. There's turn signals that are on the tail light, and there's also a horn that's incorporated into the headlight. And then when you wire up a brake into it, it will turn on a brake light when the brake is engaged. I'm also going to wire up the existing hydraulic brake that's in there. So essentially the ATV is going to have, on the one handlebar, it'll have just essentially an engine brake that when this is engaged, it'll send a signal to the controller telling it to cut the throttle and engage the engine brake, as well as turning on the light, obviously. And then when you hit the other brake, the hydraulic brake, it'll do all that, plus obviously engage the hydraulic brake as well. Now, most of these kind of hook up where it's obvious. The only places where it's going to hook up to the controller are, this one is for power for the whole thing. So it's got two black wires and a red wire. And then any of the brake ones, so from here it goes from the brake, it goes into this harness to turn on the light. And then I also have to plug this into the brake line on the controller as well, so that'll send the brake signal. Now, one thing that you might notice is that these connectors are not the same connectors that I have on my controller, and in some cases I've had that before. So I'm just going to turn the camera here. So on the controller I have these like automotive 2.8 millimeter style connectors on it. In some cases, so in the case of the 3-speed switch, it came with the corresponding 3-wire automotive plug, and I was able to basically just plug this in. I had to rearrange the order of the wires, but it already came with the right type of connector. In the case of the ignition and voltage display, it came with a different one, and I had to cut those connectors off and wire it up into the same style of automotive connector that my controller has, and the same with the throttle. So I'm going to be doing that same thing with the light, and I thought it might be helpful to see that actually happen. So one of the things, I'm just going to unplug this. That's part of that's the part that shows the voltage display on my ignition. So for this, the first thing I need is to be able to supply power to the lighting system. So a few of these don't make any sense for that. We've got like a brake lamp, brakes. We need something that's going to be on whenever the ignition is on, and we've got indicator light, charging port. Now, one thing, so if I check charging port, it is showing 54 volts, which is what we want. It's a 48 volt system, but the battery is giving off a little bit more than that right now. And indicator light right now is giving off 0. The reason for that is my ignition is off. If I turn the ignition on, charging port, make sure I get my arm out of the way here so you can see, is giving off 54 volts, and indicator light is now also giving off 54 volts. So either of those have the correct voltage. I'm going to be using indicator light because I want something. I don't want the lights to stay on when the ignition is turned off. I want the lights to turn off when the ignition is turned off. And that's what the indicator light connector on the controller does. So to start out with, I'm going to disconnect everything so I can bring this up where we can see it. So the other part of this is that I already had, this is my voltage display for the, so if I plug this in here, this is what allows this to display voltage. So they have to share that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this, and we're going to wire up a harness that has these two blacks along with the black for my voltage display, and then the red from here also going in, so that will power the entire lighting system as well as displaying voltage for the ignition system here. Before I start any of that, I'm going to disconnect the battery because I shouldn't have the battery connected while I am doing this wiring. So, start out with, we're going to cut this off. So we're going to, and then we're going to cut these off as well, giving myself as much of a wire as possible. Now, some things that you're going to need and or are going to be very handy: wire strippers. Strip off these black wires. And when you're doing these 2.8 millimeter connectors, you don't want to strip off too much. So I've got these three blacks that I want to wire in here. Now the other thing that you need, or is at least handy to have, is one of these, like, I'm going to call it a Molex style crimper, but Molex is actually like a brand name, but this style of crimper, I don't know how well it'll show up on the camera, but it's got like these teeth on it that will take this and kind of curl it around the wire. One thing I find it's handy to do is just to pinch these in just a little bit, and then once I've done that, it will actually sit down in here. You can kind of get it just to that first click on the crimp, and it actually kind of holds it in place. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my wire, or in this case wires, that need to be crimped, line them up. Ideally, you would actually twist them, but with this light of wire, that's not really doable for this. Of course, because these are stranded wires, I'm having issues with them kind of getting caught on the crimper here. Maybe I will just feed them in one at a time. I've gotten a nice crimp there with this. Now, just to test, I can actually test whether my crimp was good by throwing this in here. Oh, and I've got to, at this point, hook the battery back up if I'm going to test this. Turn the ignition back on, and because I get the voltage display, I know that my crimp was good, at least for that one wire anyway, but it should be for the other two as well. Then I'm going to unplug my battery again. I'm going to do the same thing for this red wire, which will be a little bit easier because it's only a single wire. And grab one of these 2.8mm spade connectors. Pinch the end in. Because I'm only doing a single wire, I'm actually going to stick it in this end one. Just put it in there 1 or 2 clicks on the crimper. Push through. You just want the wire kind of sitting right at the end, because I'm just doing one wire. I can hopefully show you a little bit better. And then you just squeeze the crimper till it's all the way closed. Open up. And I have a nice crimped connection. So now I've got the black and I've got the red. Now what I want to do is take one of these, and where's my indicator light? There. So I want the black in this side. Put it in here until it clicks in. And do the same thing with the red into the harness. Feed it through and it'll kind of click. Of course, that hasn't fed through cleanly. And if you ever have to feed one back out and in again, there's like a little piece that acts as a catch there. You need to make sure that that's been kind of reset, because it can sometimes get kind of like pushed down. There, that clicked nicely. So now that's in there. Just make sure they're seated nicely in there. Sometimes I need to go in with the pliers and just kind of this. If you see it's sitting a little too close to the housing, I just want to kind of bend it away from the housing. Still sitting a little too close to the housing. Okay. That's plugged in, so let's recheck our connection for this. So at least, oh, and the voltage is going down because it's not connected to the battery. Let's disengage that. Little spark. You can see I'm getting full voltage. So now I should be able to hook all of the pieces back up to this harness. So I'm going to start with the controller piece. So the controller piece hooks into this one. You can see they kind of only hook in one way. So let's grab, let's do the headlight next. The headlight's a good one. So the headlight hooks up to this one. And now that I've got the headlight hooked up, we can attempt using the controller. And I have no light. Oh, wonder. That's because I didn't have the ignition on. So there, I have a headlight. Oh, and actually this is nice. On the point out a way to make sure the glare is not. There's actually an indicator on the handlebar that your headlight is on. Woo! That's actually quite a loud horn. And then, don't have the turn signals hooked up yet, but let's do that next. So, turn signal goes into here. I'm going to move my multimeter out of the way now. I can put this here, and let's try turn signal. So there's right turn signal, left turn signal, and actually there's an indicator on the controller again, letting you know that your signal is on. The last thing is the brake. So let's hook up one of our brakes. Like I said, I'm going to be using the hydraulic brake. Now, this doesn't seem to be doing anything. So that I will have to troubleshoot, but at least I have turn signals, a headlight, and a horn. But I will have to troubleshoot why. Maybe I need to finish hooking. Remember how I had pointed out that there's kind of two parts to the brake? The one that feeds into this harness and then the one that feeds into the controller. It might have to be hooked up to the controller to finish the circuit in order for the brake to work. I will figure that out and we'll let you know. Okay, so coming back, I actually stopped part way because there was something I wanted to show you. I was correct about the fact that it needed to be hooked up to the controller. So now you'll see when I hit the brake, see when I engage the brake light comes on. When I let go, it goes off. One thing I do when I'm testing these though is, see, my assumption would have been that wiring, of course now that oh, they're touching there. My assumption would have been to wire black to black and then the red to the blue. And that was what I did at first, and that didn't work. What I ended up having to do was wire the red to the black and the black to the blue. So before you put it into a harness, you can just feed these spade connectors directly in like that in order to do your testing and make sure that you've got the wiring correct before you put it into the harness. You can take them out of the harness, but it's just easier to do it this way. One last thing I wanted to demonstrate with this, I showed the light, but I didn't show the actual functionality of the brake. So like this brake, as I had described, is going to be essentially just like an engine brake. And what I wanted to show was that, so if I engage the throttle and then hit the brake, it cuts the throttle, even though I've got the throttle pinned. As soon as I hit the brake, it basically engages, like, it cuts the throttle and breaks it from an engine perspective, at least anyway. So like I said, when my project is done, the ATV is going to have one brake that's essentially just an engine brake, and then the other brake that's hydraulic and engine brake.